Hey, this is Brooke, functional medicine dietitian specializing in fertility, and this is the Fertility Dietitian podcast, where I help you uncover the barriers that are preventing you from optimizing your fertility and teach you how to work with your body to finally take home a healthy baby. Each week, I will be diving into different topics on fertility and sharing my perspective on physiology, metabolic health, nutrition, and lifestyle approaches that have helped hundreds of couples get pregnant even after years of heartache. My goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to take back control of your fertility. Happy listening. We are talking all about the role of gut health in fertility today. Poor gut health was a huge part of my personal health and fertility story, and it is a really common barrier to fertility for the majority of my clients as well. It's completely overlooked in a conventional medicine approach, which makes sense based on their training and overall approach as a whole. But how our gut impacts fertility is pretty fascinating, if you ask me. And it makes a lot of sense once you learn about its impact. The health of our gut impacts how we are digesting food and absorbing nutrients from this food. So, our vitamins and our minerals, our proteins and our fats are required for everything from energy creation to DNA programming of a maturing egg or sperm to hormone creation and metabolism, which impacts things like the lining health. Really, every step of fertility is impacted by nutrients. Our gut is also full of many different strains of bacteria. This bacterial environment is known as the microbiome, which impacts our reproductive environment in a variety of ways, including the bacterial balance in the vagina and uterus itself, which can impact a lot of pieces of fertility, especially things like implantation and ability to support continued growth of that embryo. For instance, imbalances in gut bacteria can actually drive inflammation and impact estrogen and progesterone levels, which can then lead to a short luteal phase, often known as a luteal phase defect. Often it includes spotting before your period, and it even contributes to period pain. Part of the bacteria environment in the gut plays such a big role in estrogen balance that it's known as the estrobolome. And it's a pretty big deal. We also can't forget about the 75% of the immune system that lives in the gut and is impacted by this bacterial environment. Gut bacteria actually helps us regulate immune response. Remember that an immune system shift is required for implantation to be successful. And your immune system will also build your future baby's immune system. So, really important to have gut health and that bacterial balance checked out to support all of these pieces of fertility. And that's not all. About 20% of thyroid hormone is actually converted in the gut. So our thyroid produces T4, or should be producing T4, and then it's converted to T3 in various tissues throughout the body, but about 20% of it should be converted in the gut. But that's only happening in the presence of healthy gut bacteria. So poor gut health has a big negative impact on thyroid function. And this is a really big deal for getting pregnant, staying pregnant, and having a healthy baby. Another area that the gut impacts is blood sugar balance. Because blood sugar balance is influenced by how we are digesting and absorbing foods and nutrients. And if we're constantly on a blood sugar roller coaster, other hormones are thrown off track and egg quality is going to be negatively impacted. The bacteria in our gut doesn't only play a big role in hormone balance. So if you've heard that that's the main factor impacting fertility, remember that it also impacts the immune system function, the digestion and absorption of nutrients, all of which impact how we're using energy, how we're supporting egg quality, lining health, and really overall reproductive environment. Okay. And I could go on and on about the connections and get into nitty gritty details on certain bacteria strains, but I'm not going to do that in this episode. I just want to really highlight the overarching impact of gut health and get you thinking about whether this might be a barrier and how your body is nourishing fertility. Signs that gut health needs another look could be frequent loose stools, frequent heartburn, less than one bowel movement per day, IBS, having a sensitive stomach, but it doesn't have to be GI related. Okay. So if you have unexplained infertility, I highly recommend considering the gut. If you have not had comprehensive microbiome testing before, have not worked with a provider that understands the connections between the gut and fertility, because this is always one of the barriers in my unexplained infertility clients. And it's not ever the same issues in the gut that we're dealing with, but there's always barriers in the gut that we find. So even outside of digestive symptoms, a lot of the times my unexplained infertility clients are not having any red flag GI symptoms, but because they have unexplained infertility, have been trying for a while, we check on what's going on in the gut, and I never regret it because it's always one of their barriers. Okay. So I can't emphasize that. I can't emphasize that enough. If you have been diagnosed with PCOS or endometriosis, or even if you just have symptoms of estrogen dominance, these are all reasons to check on what's going on in the gut. Because of that estrobolome and because of how our bacterial balance impacts our immune system and just impacts how we're creating and using energy in the body, like all of these disease patterns are going to be impacted by how we're digesting and absorbing nutrients. Okay. So it's very foundational for what is happening in the body, even if it's not showing up in gut symptoms. Okay. So if you do have any of these signs, or you know that gut health is likely a barrier for you, what do you do now? Okay. So you can start by using some of these tips and tricks if you're not already. Think about slowing down your eating, starting your meals with deep breathing. That can actually help your nervous system shift from a fight or flight state into a rest and digest state, which helps get digestion started really with stimulating enzymes and just helping your gut accept that food and be ready for it. Because when we're running from a lion, digestion is not going to be optimal. Okay. And you can also, in addition to slowing down your eating, make sure that you're chewing your food really well. Digestion really does start in the mouth, and we should technically be chewing our food like 25 chews per bite. If you count a couple of bites like that, you're going to learn that that is very chewed up. And of course, it varies depending on what kind of food you're eating. Like yogurt, obviously, you don't really chew that, versus like a steak is going to need some more chewing. But that should help give you a general reference for how much you should be slowing down and how much you should be chewing. In addition to slowing down, deep breathing, and chewing your food well, think about the fiber in your diet. So our fruits and vegetables are really helpful additions in our diet. So if you're not getting enough of those in, especially things like berries, starchy veggies count here too, but also our dark leafy greens, our cruciferous veggies are all going to be helpful here. Cruciferous veggies are our veggies like our cabbage, a cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, broccoli. All of those fall into that category. Those are also going to be helpful for that bacteria itself and that estrobolome specifically. Fats are also really important. So if you're eating too low of fat in your diet, not eating enough fat in your diet, that can impact things like motility as well as that bacterial environment. So, thinking about anti inflammatory fats is really helpful. And that does include quality saturated fats. So, like your grass fed butters, fall into that. Our fat from our animal protein, thinking about like whole fat dairy, and meat with fat on it, our meat on the bone for both poultry and beef and pork. Also going to give you some good fats there as well. And then hydration is also really important for what's happening in the gut too. And hydration does not just mean water. Minerals are a really important part of hydration. Salt, high quality salt. So we don't want our standard table salt because it's actually bleached and processed to take a lot of other minerals out of it. So sea salt, great. Redmond's Real Salt is a really great brand because it's a fine ground salt and it has not been processed to take all those other minerals out of it. And then there's other minerals like our magnesium, our calcium, potassium that are also important. Starting with a whole food diet, and prioritizing animal protein is really helpful for all of those. Most people need supplemental magnesium because we just don't get enough in our diet as it is, and our nervous systems are typically tapped, which impacts how much of that we're getting. But supplements should always be individualized. So please, please, please work with somebody to individualize that supplement routine. Okay, so those are a few things you can start with. You can also support digestion even more by considering apple cider vinegar, like 1 to 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar, having that as part of like a dressing, putting that in a little bit of water and drinking that. If you're not a fan of that idea, thinking about digestive bitters prior to meals to help support your enzymes, as well as the initial tips I gave of slowing down your eating, chewing your food well. Make sure you're doing deep breathing before that meal to make sure that nervous system is ready to eat. Okay. So, a lot of these tips can help move things along, but if you do have GI symptoms and you have not had regular bowel movements for some time, or if you're just struggling with fertility, investigate further. I use GI Map, which is a name of a test, a microbiome test that I use in my practice with my clients. And it helps us see what's going on and helps you learn to work with your body where it's at right now so you can better support all of these things that are impacting your fertility through the gut. And I promise you that popping a probiotic won't fix an underlying imbalance. Changing your diet may help you feel better initially, but until you see what's going on using appropriate testing, it's really hard to tell what the best approach is for you. There might be overgrowth in there that you don't know about. It can be completely asymptomatic for a lot of people. So I never recommend cutting foods or foods groups out until we really see what's going on in your gut, because it could be an underlying imbalance that's causing symptoms and not the food as well. So if you have a hunch that there's some sort of intolerance, it could be an underlying bacterial imbalance and not really the food. So food intolerance tests are really not accurate for this reason. I know they can feel like they're helpful because they give you some sort of data, and you might cut out those foods and you might notice resolve in symptoms, but it's not addressing the underlying problem, right? The gut imbalance. And then you're taking nutrients out of your diet, especially if it's something like eggs or dairy, which are really nutrient dense foods that help us get a lot of the nutrients that we need for a lot of pieces of fertility. Every single one of my female clients has had a gut imbalance, and it has been impacting their fertility in one way or another, even if they didn't have gut symptoms. Okay. So I want you to remember that and think about that. And please know that you don't have to figure this all out on your own. If you're ready to dig deeper and start working with your body to support fertility, I would love to be part of your support team. You know where to find me. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fertility Dietitian podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review to let me know what topics you want more of or less of. If you want to keep learning, subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out my website for more info on my private coaching program, Master Your Fertility, or my membership community, Fertility Blueprint. And don't forget my digital store. Come say hi on YouTube and Instagram. See you in the next episode.